It's so taboo to talk about periods. It's such an issue to many people to even hear about it. They cringe, they get uncomfortable. 1 out of every 10 women suffer from a disease that not many know of, called endometriosis. It is a disorder in where the tissue that usually lines the uterus grows outside of the uterus. It's like literally internal bleeding and scarring. That's the best way I can put it. I can remember getting my first period when I was 10 years old. Up until that point, I always suffered from stomach issues. I felt like it was just me being nervous, you know? Every time I got stressed or nervous, I always had to call home from grade school and let them know, hey, I'm in a lot of pain. I can't really be here. I started getting my periods and it was a lot of pain, or at least I felt like it was too much pain. But my mother reassured me that it was normal and that it was perfectly okay. Little by little, they noticed that the discomfort was getting really bad and that she had never seen anything like it. I think my frequent hospital visits started occurring when I was 13 years old. And when they took me to the hospital for the first time, they said they don't know what it could be. All the exams were perfectly normal and it might have been kidney stones, and they let me go home. But I remember that day I couldn't even sit up straight or stand up straight. They had to carry me down the stairs from my house. It got bad again and it sent me to the emergency room again for the second time that year. This time they said they were going to do an MRI scan because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was in a lot of pain, and by this time I had 3 shots of morphine in the time that I was in the ER. Forward after that, you have to do a checkup every time that you go to urgent care or the ER. My pediatrician looked very confused. He said, I don't understand why the first time they told you it could have been a kidney stone when it clearly says on the form on my computer. I trusted that the doctors knew what they were doing. I trusted a lot in the healthcare system that we have now. The pains ended up getting a lot worse. I ended up getting fevers at times when I was around my period. I felt like throwing up. I started seeing double vision. Again, my mom said it was normal and that I had to take my naproxen that they had given me at the time. From naproxen, then it became ibuprofen. From ibuprofen, then it became codeine. From codeine, it just became Vicodin. By this time, I was still undiagnosed. They had ran all kinds of tests on me, every test that you can possibly imagine, from x-rays, CT scans, ultrasounds, pap smears, urine tests, blood samples. Everything came back normal. There was a point where they had taken me to the ER and they had told my father that I was just seeking attention. My father looked at the ER doctor and said, you think she can fake fevers? You need to figure out what's wrong with her. The only way to get diagnosed with this illness is if someone thinks you have it and if they perform a surgery to see that the blood is not where it needs to be. When I was 18 years old, they got really bad. It got to the point where I was unable to drive at some points, and by this time it wasn't only when I got my period, it was almost all the time. I'm one of the lucky ones that got to conceive. I have a daughter, so I can tell you that it was worse than labor. Many women with this disease go through life wishing that they've had a child, wishing that they would be able to carry. And here I was blessed with a child at such a young age, and to finally be diagnosed with an illness that is the leading cause of infertility it's shocking. I was very active growing up, constantly in teams, and finally I found a sport that I love, which was soccer. I tried out for college soccer. That year for tryouts, I remember that it was a summer and I was in a lot of pain, probably my worst year. People don't talk about the heavy bleeding. They say that it's not connected with endometriosis, but I bled that year for 6 months straight. The doctors again could not find what was wrong with me. They kept letting me go and then telling me to rest, but as a 19-year-old, I had goals in mind and I had to get on that soccer team. I remember going to soccer practice 2-3 hours a day, going to urgent care or ER after, and doing it all over the next day. Again, people say cramps, and I hate that word because what I was feeling wasn't cramps. It was shooting pains. It was a pain that burned my entire body, and your body can only tolerate so much pain. And I think my body ended up just breaking down, throwing up, fevers. It was a way to try to get out whatever the heck was bothering me, and it couldn't. When I was 22 years old, a nurse finally listened and she said, call me every single time you're in pain. And I did. And for 4 months, she monitored my pain levels, when I had pain, when I didn't have pain. And she said, I think you have endometriosis and I'm gonna send you to a specialist. The specialist said that the only way to find out if it was endometriosis was through surgery. After a decade of suffering, I was glad someone finally listened. My family started to believe the doctors. I mean, they're doctors. The test kept coming back normal. So they just figured that it was all in my head. There were times where I would have to bite a towel just so I wouldn't scream and freak out my family. I think it was very difficult for people to understand that I was in pain, because on the outside I look perfectly normal and I'm very outgoing. I love sports, so they just couldn't understand it. And I love dancing, they just didn't get it. How can you be okay one day and then not okay the next day? How can you be okay 1 minute and then not okay the next minute? I don't know. Not even the doctors know. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know how to cure it. If they don't know, how the heck am I supposed to know? At 23 years old, I was finally diagnosed. And a nightmare that I thought was over began. My name is Stephanie Berenice. I'm 26 years old and I have endometriosis.